go ahead and get started. I hope everybody is doing well this afternoon. As Assistant Chief Stallings, is it Chief or Assistant? Chief?
Assistant Chief.
Assistant?
Marty, whatever you want to
Okay.
call it.
Marty has already introduced Dennis and I. We're from Palmetto 800. Our office is in Columbia. I have been employed with Motorola for a little over 12, 13 years, but I've been involved with public safety communications. So my history in public safety communications goes back to a little bit further than 12 or 13 years. It goes back to 1984. I started out as a dispatcher for Newberry County Sheriff's Department. I was there for quite a long time. I dispatched for the Sheriff's Department, countywide fire, EMS, and local city police. I loved what I did as a dispatcher. Sometimes I miss it, sometimes I don't. I love public service. I love customer service. I've been the training coordinator for a little over a year now. I love going out, getting in my car and coming out and being with everyone in the public safety field. I commend all of y'all. Thank you for a job. Well done. I'm very social, I'm hospitable, so I've also been deemed a social butterfly. So if you've seen me at some of the fire conferences, I'm happy, bubbly, just like I am today, a little bit camera shy for the video camera here, but I will try to forget about that over there. Training for Palmetto 800 interoperability, it is a must. Now this class is provided by the Division of State Information Technology through a Homeland Security grant. This class is provided at no cost to you. As firefighters, you do get 3.5 hours of training credit through the State Fire Academy. Do we have anyone in here that is law enforcement? Law enforcement, South Carolina Police Officers, the Criminal Justice Academy has accredited this course. It's also accredited for 3.5 hours of continuing education training credit. But one of the most critical discoveries that has occurred when we're faced with a major incident and its aftermath was the lack of interoperable communications. Palmetto 800 is South Carolina's answer. This system allows you direct communications between other fire agencies, police, EMS, hospitals, and other emergency transport units. So should you roll up on the scene of a down power line or a power pole and you need to request mutual aid assistance even at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you have in your 800 radios pre-programmed mutual aid channels. You turn to those mutual aid channels, identify your agency, tell them we have this situation, but you have the ability just to switch to channels in your radio to request mutual aid assistance 24/7. The Palmetto 800 system came about as a result of Hurricane Hugo and its impact on the state of South Carolina. Palmetto 800 was the first system owned and managed by Motorola. Motorola owning this system provides the latest technology without the burden and expense of you managing and maintaining your own system. Now, there are user fees associated with the cost of maintenance, FCC required inspections, telephone lines, the connectivity between all of the sites, utilities. So when I was talking about Motorola owning this system, there are 7 private systems in the state of South Carolina owned by those local entities. The 7 counties, you have Sumter, Marion, Horry, Charleston, Beaufort, York, and Florence counties. They have private systems. They also have the mutual aid channels in their radios as well. They also have inter-system mutual aid channels. If their private system was to fail, Motorola has infrastructure built in their counties, so they can switch over and talk on the Palmetto 800 system until their system is restored. Having those private system owners with our 800 channels and the mutual aid channels, that provides you interoperability option with those private agencies. Y'all remember Hurricane Hugo? Well, this slide is what we like to call inspiration. Inspiration for interoperability. Interoperability is the strength of the Palmetto 800 system. Because we train to a basic standard and we suggest our customers to program their radios in a manner as such, you can take your radio and go anywhere in the state of South Carolina and mutual aid assistance, or if you're handed another radio that's not your own, we want you to be as familiar with operating that radio as you are with your own. This slide represents our user breakdown. Our largest user base is your local government, your police, fire, and EMS. Your state government, your highway patrol, and SLED. Now there are other users on the system. Those make up your federal agencies, such as your FBI, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the National Weather Service. We've got airports, schools, and some hospitals. Power utilities, South Carolina Electric and Gas, Lawrence Electric, or Berkeley Electric. They're there for response to down power lines or power poles. They have utility mutual aid talk groups in their radios. It's part of the standard state programming template, but the utility talk groups are not in everyone's radio. This is a public safety system, no private companies. Now we do have a lot of private ambulance services out there coming up nowadays. If they have radios, they cannot come on the Palmetto 800 system unless they go to one of our existing customers and request a mutual interoperability agreement. That's the only way those private emergency transport units can come on the system. Now with this many subscribers, there is a chance for a lost or stolen radio. This does happen. You're responding, you're in a room full of people with a bunch of radios, you pick up the wrong radio, or if you're responsible for maintaining that inventory of radios and you scoop them all up and put them back in a closet, then another agency says, hey, I'm missing a radio. Or if you suspect it's stolen. Now, if your radio got in the hands of someone, an individual, a criminal, they could really do a world of hurt. But we can resolve that. If you suspect your radio has been stolen, call the Palmetto 800 office and let us know what the radio ID number is. We can send an over-the-air command. It's called an inhibit command. We put in that radio ID, and when that radio is powered on, it will die. It will turn into a brick. It won't be good for anything except a paperweight or a weapon. Now this is our mobile coverage map. This represents the 95% of the mobile coverage over 95% of the state. And remember, there's no radio system coverage that can be 100% reliable. There will always be particular times or locations where that signal strength is below, what's needed for the satisfactory performance. But this is a mixed mode, analog and digital system capable of P25. P25 is all digital. And this map represents the Anderson simulcast P25 system map. Anderson County agencies, they have all digital radios. Now before trunking, radio users must have their own frequency. Frequency separation is mandated by the FCC so that users aren't interfering with each other. Very few conversations could occur. A lot of times that frequency was just sitting out there when nobody was transmitting, just like when I used to work for Newberry, that they had one channel. So when they weren't talking, it was just sitting out there not being used. But in the trunking world, those frequencies are statically assigned to each repeater at each radio tower site in the state. There's a transmit and a receive on each of those repeaters. So when a call is placed, so when you push to talk, you're on a talk group. When you push to talk, the system directs you to an available repeater. It's transparent to you guys. This allows a much better use of the 800 megahertz spectrum. So you might key up once and hit repeater 3 at the Walterboro site. You might key up again and hit repeater number 4 at the Walterboro site. It's transparent to y'all. You might have heard our system known as the Public Safety Shared System. We are sharing all of these frequencies statically assigned all over the state. Now Motorola doesn't own any of these frequencies, They are owned by the customers. This system is constantly monitored and maintained to ensure that we are in FCC compliance. We do quarterly maintenance checks to make sure that the antennas and the feed lines and all of that infrastructure equipment at that site is optimal and it's set to a standard. We do monthly checks of the site, facilities, checking the HVAC system, the generator, make sure that generator is going to crank in case there's a commercial power outage. Now, the brains of the system is called the zone controller. It is located downtown Columbia. Now, when radios on a trunk system are powered on, they immediately commence affiliation with that system. So, your radio is powered on, there's an exchange of information. That radio ID programmed into your radio, the talk group that you're turned to. Your radio is talking to the site, the Walter Burr site, constant communication back and forth. You're talking to the Walter Burr site, and at Walter Burr site, there's a link. Does this have a pointer on it? This pointer?
There should be a little switch.
You're moving the slide.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Get you back.
Yeah, just give me back.
Should be the top one. Here we go.
Okay, thank you.
Let me get this out. There you go.
All right, where were we? When you power your radio on, we were talking about the system will know what radio ID is in that radio, what talk group you're affiliated on, what site you're affiliated on. When you transmit, you're transmitting to that nearest tower. There's a link from the tower, every one of those tower sites, there's a link. It goes back to the zone controller. That's how you're able to talk citywide, countywide, and statewide. All of those connectivities, all those T1s, it's either a high-speed data T1 or microwave or a fiber. When all of those links are working, it's what we like to call wide area trunking. Now, at each one of those tower sites, there's between 4 and 15 repeaters, and it's dependent upon the need for channel resources. Does anyone know where Plum Branch, South Carolina is at? Plum Branch is over in McCormick. When I went to work with the system 13 years ago, Plum Branch had 4 repeaters at that site. Today, it still has 4 repeaters because the need for channel resources is not that great as you would have in a large area such as Columbia or Charleston. But at each one of the radio tower sites, there's between 4 and 15 repeaters. So when you key up, your radio is directed to that talk group, and it keys up the site that you're currently affiliated on, and then you're transmitting to all of the sites that your talk group is turned to. Now, there are 78 of these radio tower sites around the state. The system is comprised of simulcast and IR sites, or IntelliRepeater sites. So you're connected to the site, and the site is connected to the zone controller, and the zone controller sends that signal out to all of those sites. That's how you can talk from citywide, countywide, or statewide. Now, the Palmetto 800 system, this system was designed as a public safety system from its initial inception. So on older systems, there was ample opportunity to miss a call. You simply did not know that your transmission was acknowledged unless they, acknowledge you, said 10-4. But on the Palmetto 800 system, when you key up, you'll hear one of 3 tones. I've got those wave files, and the first tone that I'm going to play for you is the talk permit tone. Now, that's what you hear when you key up your talk permit tone. The other tone that you hear is called a fast busy. Has anyone ever heard that? What do you normally do when you hear the fast busy? I can rather guess. I can guess. Well, The fast busy, it's just telling you that there are no channels available currently as when you keyed up. The system will see in your radio a talk permit tone when a channel becomes available. And the purpose of the busy is so you don't have to keep calling again. When you hear that busy, the system will see in your radio a talk permit tone, and then you can key up and continue with your conversation. The other tone that you will hear is a no access tone or a solid bonk. She's usually not quite that long.
I can't do twice.
Well, the no access tone or solid bonk, it could mean several things. It could mean your ID is not turned on in the system. It could mean that no one else is affiliated on that talk group. Or you could be in a questionable coverage area. For example, poor coverage in a building. Radio RF does not go through concrete or steel. We had a Walmart. Walmart people came into the Irmo area, built this large Walmart near where I live, and they said, okay, you need to install a bidirectional amplifier to boost the RF when we proceed into the building. Now your portable puts out about 3 watts of power and your mobile puts out about 35 watts. So, you know, we're suggesting, and a lot of fire agencies have built into the plans, when they respond to a large building, they switch to a direct or attack channel. But it's dependent upon each individual agency. We discussed each user has a unique ID in your radio. It's identified in the zone controller. System knows what IDs are on each site and knows where to direct the transmissions. Then your dispatcher. If you were to key up your radio, and even when there's no audio, your dispatcher will be able to see who is transmitting. Now, we do have some agencies who have alias database managers. Some customers like to have programmed to where they might see engine 10, rescue truck 82, ladder 12 identified when they key up the radio. You wouldn't want to program anyone's name in the alias database because a lot of times personnel changes over time. Now, the emergency feature. Who's familiar with the orange button on the top of the radio? Does anybody know how to reset the emergency in the system? I think I hear a winner. Yes, if you accidentally press the emergency button on the top of your radio, you want to hold that orange button down for 2 seconds until it beeps, and that clears the emergency in the system. One thing you do not want to do, you do not want to turn that little channel selector on top of that radio, because you will take that emergency across all of those talk groups. So, you may or may not get the attention that you want if you press that emergency feature. It's also known as a man-down feature. You can have your radio programmed to, if it's laying in a horizontal position, that emergency will automatically go off. Are y'all happy to be here? Yes, you'll get 3.5 hours of continuing education credit. What is the technical name for the perfect world scenario when all sites are connected as they should be? Wide area trunking. And what is the main purpose of the Palmetto 800 system? Well, to enhance communications and to allow you to interoperate among agencies. And who makes up the largest user base on the system? Your local government agencies. How's everybody doing? Does anybody have any questions? Please feel free to ask questions throughout. Now, the next few slides, we're going to be talking about the mutual aid, the pre-programmed talk groups that's in your radio for emergency response and special events. We like to call these for the common good. They are there for disaster recovery and cleanup, woods fire coordination, when firefighters had to mobilize and go to Horry County. They went over to one of the South Carolina mutual aid talk groups. This is how they were other agencies went in to help Horry County to battle that fire. Special event, football game at Williams-Brice Stadium, where you have a lot of police, fire, and EMS on standby. The purpose of a mutual aid talk group is to coordinate multiple agencies on one channel so they're not tying up their normal everyday dispatch talk group. Good example, a paramedic responds to a medical call at one of those sections or the concourse there at the stadium. Law enforcement officer who is also monitoring that same talk group hears this call and they realize, hey, I'm in that section, let me go respond and see how can I be of assistance. There's another form of interoperability. It is called dynamic regrouping. Does anyone remember the Aiken train derailment or the Graniteville train derailment in Aiken? Aiken County contacted us and said that they had some agencies coming to help them. Well, those agencies did not have the Aiken talk group in them. What we did, we took the radio IDs of the responding units, dynamically regrouped those radios to the Aiken County talk group. We like to call this programming on the fly. So when those units got on the scene, all they had to do, power their radio on, and they were directed to that talk group. Now, in your radio, there's multiple zones. A zone is just a group of talk groups. One of the zones, you have SC Call. It is a statewide mutual aid calling channel. It is monitored by EMD. If you need to request a mutual aid talk group for a special event or an emergency, you could contact EMD or the Division of State Information Technology. Within that same zone with SC Call, you have 10 South Carolina mutual aid talk groups. These are all analog talk groups. Within that same zone, you have South Carolina air to ground. This allows you for the mutual aid use in coordinating that air unit for the air to ground operations only. South Carolina regional talk groups. It's another zone in your radio. These are divided up by the 7 highway patrol troops in the state of South Carolina. Those talk groups work on the sites in that specific region. An example of a multi-agency use with these could be a vehicle chase from county to county. At 3 a.m. every morning, Highway Patrol, they do radio checks on these talk groups. They want to make sure that everything is working before it hits the fan. This is a breakdown of the counties, of the sites, actually the counties for the regions, and then the sites within that region. And we have 3 that are statewide assignable. Another bank of mutual aid talk groups are law enforcement talk groups. These are for law enforcement operations only. Special events, special operations, emergencies, or disasters. Hurricane lane reversal. They are used for drug or traffic enforcement operations. When you turn to another zone in your radio, there are a statewide network of redundant conventional repeaters throughout the state. You can use your radio in a conventional repeated mode or a direct mode. Direct mode is just radio to radio. It has a 1/2 mile to a 2 mile radius. A repeated mode, you would just be transmitting off the nearest conventional repeater that's closer to the incident that you are at. A lot of these conventional repeaters are co-located at our tower sites, and there are some conventional repeaters that might find up on top of a tall building, hospital or a tower, a water tank. Now these are they're national and South Carolina mutual aid channels. The iCall 8Call 90 through 8TAC 94. Those are those for the out-of-state radios that come into your state and want to help with mutual aid assistance. Those frequencies have to be programmed into those out-of-state radios in order to interoperate with y'all. Then 8 SCTAC 1 through 8 SCTAC 4 can be used in a direct or conventional. And then we have a digital TAC where you can talk in a digital mode, 8 SCTAC, SCDTAC 4 or 5. These all conform to the National Interoperability Plan. This map, it can be downloaded off of the CIO website. Their website is cio.sc.gov. You can also download some other maps as well. Let's see. There are 2 conventional repeaters. One is at Kennedy's site, and it's 8TAC 94, and then you have another conventional repeater at the Walterboro site, it's 8 SCTAC 1. Any questions? How's everybody doing? All right. What if there's a loss of connectivity? This does happen. You could have a backhoe incident, digs up that fiber cable along the road, or you could have a vehicle accident that runs over that telephone pedestal. When this happens, that link between the zone controller and the site is severed. The site goes into what we like to call, we don't like to call it, but what we call site trunking. Site trunking is a redundant function of the system. It operates as it normally would, but it loses the ability to talk in a wide area mode. We suggest our customers to develop a site trunking plan. Now, if your agency utilizes more than one tower site, and one of those towers goes into site trunking, a site trunking plan, you'd have plans in place to where the dispatcher can coordinate everyone on either the site that's in site trunking or get everyone off of that site that's in site trunking. Now your radio will flash site trunking, or some variation thereof, and it may even emit a tone. Now when the site goes in site trunking, that T1 between the zone controller and that site goes down. Channel number 1, or repeater number 1 at that site will take over and basically is the brains of that system, the same thing as that zone controller does downtown Columbia. So that your radio will go out and try to find a wide trunking site. If the RSSI or the radio signal strength isn't strong enough, it will go back to the site that's in site trunking. Now we have simulcast sites on the system. A simulcast site is made up of a prime and remote sites. They use the same set of frequencies. It covers a greater geographical area. So when you lose that T1 between the zone controller and that prime site, we have redundant site controllers at that site. One of those controllers steps up, keeps that site operational. If I lost that T1 link between that prime site and that remote site, due to the criticality and timing that those T1s have to have between the prime and remote sites, that remote site just drops out and it would appear as though there's reduced coverage. So basically the coverage for that area goes away, and you just be reduced based on the coverage in that area. Getting tongue-tied. Are y'all ready to get out of here? Site trunking is what kind of function of the Palmetto 800 system which keeps the site operational but loses the ability to talk in a wide area mode. Redundant. During site trunking, if a radio sets off an emergency, that emergency is received as normal. You're correct. During site trunking, you must be on the same site as the radio who activated the emergency in order to receive it. And when everything is working as it should, all sites are talking with all sites, this is called. Wide area trunking. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I work full-time down at Somerville,
Yes, sir.
and I guess about a couple of months ago, y'all had a site go down or something, and our radio people in Somerville were telling us we had to switch to another site in the system. And it was real confusing because you had to go to this channel, push this button, go to another channel, push another button. Is it still like that? I mean, are these radios going to be like that too?
They were directing you to go to a different channel or a different site. Okay, I'm gonna defer that question to Dennis.
I can answer that one. I was intimately involved with that. About, if you remember correctly, probably 6-7 months ago, there was no coverage in downtown Somerville. We put a site there. We named it Somerville, but there was already a site in Niceville called Somerville. So that led to a little confusion. They just installed a brand new console in the town of Somerville, their dispatch center.
Right.
So that added to some confusion. So they were still developing their site trunking plans for Dorchester in the town of Somerville. So everybody was on the same sheet of music. What also happened is that site is right in the parking lot of the 911 center and dispatch center. So when you pull into that area, your radio wants to be there because it's right under it. Okay? So it's difficult to force your radio to a different channel. What they were trying to do was come up with a site trunking plan, and they were still in planning process, testing. So that's what led to a lot of confusion. I think they've got it down now. It could be as simple as having the dispatcher using the console with a radio, tone remoting to a radio, talking to the dispatch console to a radio, locked on the site, and then they can patch the two together. It could be that simple, or it could be as complex as having all the users that see a particular site coming to change their channels to another location.
Yeah, he was telling, Rob Chris.
Oh, yeah, Rob.
He was calling every station on the phone saying, look, take all your walkies, do this and this and this and this, and do the same thing on the truck radios, and we were like lost as hope and go.
I understand. There are two pieces to that. One is the console itself, because it's a wireline console. It's just like a site. And the call is going to that, the wireline console, here in not too far future. So it doesn't have any sites to worry about. It is hardwired directly into the switch in Columbia. But if that site goes away, that's how it gets its RF to that site. So if that T1 goes away, you have to have backup resources. They were still installing their backup resources, which is basically a radio that's found in Iraq that they're tone remoted to, keying a mic in dispatch, but keying up that one radio that has a directional antenna on it that's locked on the site that has a problem. Then they can patch them together, kind of a quasi T1 connect. Okay? That's what they were working through. So the first couple of times, especially when you go to a new type of system, it gets real confusing. And I hope I haven't lost anybody here. A couple of key things that Farrah touched on that I wanted to touch on because I've done a lot of these brand new customers coming on board. You're going from a system today that's just a single radio to a repeater to multiple radios, right? And back and forth, repeaters. So you don't have tones, your radios don't make sounds or anything like that. Dispatch doesn't, you don't know that you got a hold of dispatch or that they heard you until dispatch says 10-4 o'clock. There's some kind of transfer this has to go between you and the person you're talking to so you know that person heard it. It's important that you know that proceed to talk tone. A lot of things have happened in those 2 or 3 milliseconds it takes from the time you see that radio. But also 2 or 3 syllables can be lost. So when you first get these radios in your hand, listen for that push to talk. It'll become second nature in a couple of weeks. But listen for that before you start talking. Okay? One of the common things you do is key the radio, you start talking, right? Because that's what you've done your whole time, your whole life, working with the radio. But in the trunk world, The system takes 2 or 3 milliseconds, and it's quick. You push, and then you get the connect tone. It has taken all the radios that are on this site, all the radios on this site, and tied them together. All right? So it does take, 2 or 3 milliseconds. I'm talking about seconds, 2 or 3 milliseconds from the time you do that. The problem we run into for new customers that come on the systems, a lot of times they're not aware of that, they don't think about it. They grab the radio and key like they normally have in the VHF or UHF world, and you say, dispatch unit 4, and they might have heard unit 4. They didn't hear dispatch. So you want to be cognizant of that, and make sure that you got that. Does that answer your question? If every site trunking plan is different because every dispatch center is located in a different place away from the site across the state. So there's not a standard for site trunking plans. They have to be developed by a dispatch center. So if you only use one site, and if the whole county of Pelican can be covered by the Walsboro site, not a problem. Nobody has to change anything. You see site trunking, you can continue to march. You're using the IR site, the intel repeater sites today. We wanted to brief you on how a simulcast system works because you may go there tomorrow. I mean tomorrow literally, within the next couple of years. If we go P25 and all your radios have today's standard, what you're using in UHF world, conventional, direct mode, radio to radio, antenna to antenna, to repeated mode, and trunk, and P25. So the radios you're getting with this will do all of it. The stuff your current radios do, plus what's going to happen in the future. That's one of the reasons they're on my radio. If you have any questions about how they work, what you're hearing, the sounds you make, you can contact Farrah or myself. I do this every day, travel across the state, helping people with interference problems, radio problems, support, keep them tuned and ready to go. So, any questions about what I have said? No? Okay, good. Farrah, got your hair.
Oh, no problem. Any more questions? Now the next part is the fun part. It's what everybody likes, the hands-on. We'll get Rex we'll take about a 15-minute break. You get the radios handed out, and we'll start back. So let's see, what time is it now? All right, we'll go ahead and get started while Rex is handing those radios out. There are a lot of, y'all are getting the Apex 6000 IE, if I'm not mistaken. But there are a lot of models of radios out there, and we train, tell you what all the buttons are for, tell you what all the soft menu commands are for in the radio. Because if you go and respond to another agency in a mutual aid capacity and they hand you a radio and it's a little bit different, or if it's lacking some buttons that your radio has, or it has more buttons than your radio has, you would probably be sitting there wondering, well, what does this do? Or my radio doesn't have this. So the purpose of this class is to go through all of those soft menu commands and all of the buttons and the knobs on a radio. Now Rex is handing out Apex 6000s, and they're called like Model 1s and Model 2s. The models are dependent upon whether or not it has a numeric keypad on the front or if it has a display on the front. Now these Apex radios you're being handed now has a display on the top as well. I'm going to go through the basics, and then I'm going to hand out some cheat sheets for Model 1 and Model 2s. But the basics of the radio, on the top, you've got a power on and off knob. That volume control can also be programmed user specific. For example, you might, at the fire agency, you may want to have your volume control programmed to where it's set loud, so you don't have to worry about, oh, is my volume turned up loud enough to hear the transmission when you got a loud fire engine standing next to you. Or if you're a law enforcement officer, we might have some narcotics or surveillance units that uses an earpiece, and they may want to have the volume control set at a particular volume level. The second knob on the top of the radio is your channel selector. So whatever zone you're in, you have the option of having up to 16 talk groups or channels within that zone. The other item of interest on top of a radio is your emergency button, an orange button, man down feature. Do you remember how I said to reset it in the system if you accidentally press it?
Hold it down.
Hold it. That's correct. Hold it down for 2 seconds until it beeps, and that will clear the emergency. Then on the top of your radio, you got this antenna. It just simply screw off and screw back on. So we'll make sure that it's seated securely. There are a couple of things that we suggest with the antenna. We ask that you do not chew on the antenna. We ask that you do not tie it in a knot. We ask that you do not clip your mic clip to the antenna, because over time that clip will wear indentions in the outer coating and will damage the fibers on the inside. A couple of small features on the top of a radio. You might find an ABC toggle switch. That ABC might be a concentric switch around the base of the channel selector. Those are unique. They can be programmed to the customer's need. It can be programmed to go between 3 different zones, zone A, B, and C. It could be programmed to lock a keypad. That ABC might be programmed to turn your scan on and turn your scan off. So it could be different across agencies. There's also, if the concentric switch isn't an ABC, it might have an O or an O with a slash. This means you can switch between a clear or a secure talk group. Secure talk group has digital encryption. You must have that secure key programmed into your digital radio in order to hear a digitally encrypted talk group. That's the basic top of the radio. Now on the side of a radio, and what I'm going to tell you may not be how your radio is programmed, but these buttons on the side can be programmed as the customer desires. You got your push talk button. The button at the top may or may not be programmed as a light button. You would press that button and it will illuminate the display. However, if I'm correct, any button will illuminate that display. That light button, that top button on your radio on the side, it is used, it's called the side top button, and it's for voice mute.
On some.
On some, but keep that, let's put that voice mute to the side right now, and we'll come back to that. The side middle button is to zone up in some radios. Then you have a side bottom button. It's your site display search button. Yes, Dennis?
Which radios are zone up, Rick?
The 1.5 should be.
Yep,
Okay, good. So you have a maximum, how many zones?
6.
6 zones. So you have an A, B, C, an A1, an A2, a B1, a B2, a C1, and a C2. It can be confusing, so I wanted to clarify that for you. And so when you switch to A, to change from the A1 to A2 and then back and forth, you would hit that zone up button, okay, that he's talking about. That's unique to the radio that only has the top display. That's a model 1.4. Model 2s are the ones with the limited keypad in the front. They got 3 buttons and they have the front display as well.
That explains the side buttons on your radio. Standard programming, this top purple button is a light button or a flip button. Is their button, the top purple button, uses a flip? Or
Oh, I'm going to have to look.
Okay, we'll come back to that. On my radio, this side middle button here is my site display search. What a site display search button will do, you press that button and it will tell you what site you're currently affiliated on in the radio signal strength. If you needed to scan or switch to a different site, what we call forcing your radio to a different site. You would hold that site display button down while watching the display, and it will say scanning site. You release it, press it again, and you can see that it might have switched sites. So say you press it, you might be on the Walterboro site, but you have to force your radio to Kennedy's. You would hold it down, scanning site, release, press it again, then you would check your display to see if it has switched sites. And then on some models of radios, this bottom side button may be programmed as a call response button. A call response is pressed if a private call is initiated to your radio. Now, a private call is an additional paid feature on the system. What that initiating radio would do, they would have a numeric keypad, and they would put in that 6-digit ID, and it would alert your radio. That's all about the side button. But like I said, your button, I'm going to hand this out shortly so everyone can have a copy, and even if we run out, we'll just get some more copies made. And the reason I'm explaining all of this to y'all is what I said previously is we want you to be comfortable with your radio. We want you to know how to use it, or if you have to switch. Or if you're going to Help and Mutual Aid, or you're going up to Columbia Fire Department and they hand you a radio. Those side buttons and those hot buttons might be programmed specifically for Columbia Fire Department, but I want y'all to be familiar with how it may be programmed. On the front of the radio, you may or may not have a display. You may or may not have a numeric keypad. You can talk into each side of the Apex radio. Best practice is holding the radio 1 to 2 inches in front of your mouth when you're transmitting, not like this. You're not going to have that great of audio coming through if you're talking directly here. This radio is to your side. If you're around loud apparatus like a pump panel on a truck, you want to turn away from where the sound's at, and you want to have the radio close to your mouth when you're transmitting. Test 1, 2. Oh, Dennis, you must have switched off of the...
I did, but I'm going right back there. I'm there.
Always remember, if you yell into the mic, a lot of times you're going to be inaudible. You're not, when you're screaming, and I know your adrenaline is running, when your adrenaline is really running, it's a natural common instinct to really get into your message, because you really want to emphasize what's happening. But remember, with these radios, don't have to yell. Okay. You may or may not have a numeric keypad. All right. On the front of the radio, you might have directional arrows. Let me see what I have here. Okay. You don't have arrows. You may or may not have a keypad. You might have directional arrows. Okay. This Model 2 has arrows. You have 2 buttons, one with a picture of a house on it. It's called your home button. The other button directly across from the home button has a picture of a computer on it. That home button can serve 2 purposes. If you have navigated to a different zone and channel in your radio, you would hold that home button down and it takes you back to your dispatch talk group. We suggest that your dispatch talk group be programmed Zone 1, Channel 1. The home button is also used if you have pushed in one of the soft menu commands. It serves as an enter key or an exit out of that sub-menu. The Model 2s have a 1 dot, a 2 dot, and a 3 dot button. Like this one here. So if you have the Model 2s and Model 1s, go ahead and power your radio on, please. Those with the Model 2 will see what I'm talking about.
That's a channel announce feature. It's assigned, it's just a voice channel or a voice file. It's assigned to every channel in your radio. So if you got it in your fire suit or whatever, you have your microphone on here, you're changing channels, you don't have to be looking at the radio to see what channel you're on. It tells you in your ear what channel you're on.
Okay.
It looks like they tried to find some nice voice there.
At least it's not mine.
You would blow mine. I have such a southern country voice. You don't want mine. And when I was dispatching, I hated to hear myself play back on the recorder. It was just, but you know what? Mine's not as bad as RJ's back at Palmetto 800. Y'all know where Ware Shoals is at? RJ's from Ware Shoals. Call him up. Call Palmetto 800 and talk to RJ. He's got a southern accent.
That's really Rex's voice they just called.
All right, those of you with the screen, when you power it on, and even the top display, on the front screen, you'll have what we call soft menu options, which is in the very bottom of the display. The 1 dot, 2 dot, 3 dot button will, they're like variable action buttons per se, but they will cause that command whenever you see them in the display. Do y'all see the word zone in your display? If you press that 1 dot button below the word zone, in your display, the first alphanumeric position, it will flash. Then you can arrow through the different zones in the radio.
And you can see all the different zones that are in it on that display. I like that better than the old Astro 25 radio. It's like a cell phone. You see everything in there. Each one of those zones can be up to 16 channels within it.
Well, actually, it can be more than that.
Oh, really?
Yes, it can be.
Your template?
Yes. There are, I believe, 2 zones that actually have more than 16 channels. Those would be 700 meg, and this is only in the 2s.
You have a channel down button behind it?
Yes, there's a menu button for channel as well when you get to the direct modes, or for the 700s, and that's going to be your 700 TAC and your 700 TAC direct, or DIR. Those have 18 channels in the mod 2s.
You look at those soft menu items at the bottom of the screen in front of the radio. As you arrow to the left or right, you'll see that they'll change. It's just like any computer. You're sliding the whole list of menu items to the left and right on the screen. And the button right below it is when you pick to activate that particular function. There should be one on there that says channel. If you're within the zone and you hit that channel button, the display will change and show you all the channels that are within that zone. And so you just arrow down to what you want. And that should work in any of the zones, right?
I didn't put it in
You didn't put it in the...
I didn't put it in the trunking world because there was nothing in the trunking world that went beyond 16 channels. The only place was in conventional.
Okay.
All right. Before I float off of this slide here, this is just showing an XCS 2500 and 5000. But those mutual aid talk groups, we suggest to be programmed usually the last few zone positions in your radio. So this is how they would be listed in your radios. SC call, maybe not in this order, but this is, you would have SC call with South Carolina Mutual Aid, South Carolina Regionals. If you're law enforcement, you would have law enforcement, and then your PATCON, the conventional network of repeaters, and you might have direct, the state direct.
What's significant to note about that is that those channels, with the exception of the law enforcement that are only going guns and badges, those channels are in every radio in the state. Every one of them. So each one of those is a potential way to talk to someone else. And the whole system being designed for you to go anywhere in the state, talk to anybody you need to, and for them to come to you. You just have to have a mutual discussed channel to go to. Both conventional, which means it's not trunked. They're not tied together. They're either repeaters or they're not repeaters, they're just out there. Or the actual talk groups, which is in your SCMAs, and your regions, and your LA Commons.
These are the explanations, and you have these in your printout. All right, these are the soft menu items. You may or may not have these programmed in your radio with the display on the top, but this is what they mean. If you have a zone in your display, we explain that. Now, the Model 1s don't have a page command. If you have a radio that has the display with the page in the bottom of the display, press that button, usually the 2-dot button below the word page, and left arrow 1 time. You should see My ID. So the page may not be programmed under that 2-dot menu selector.
It's arrow up in Apex.
Arrow, I apologize. The Apex is arrow up.
It'll say My ID, give an ID, that's the individual radio ID.
So used to do it at XDS.
It's going to be the 3-dot button on there.
It's the 3-dot button.
It's not in the Model 1. If you look at Model 1, you have a very limited number of buttons to choose from, so you have to.
Do y'all see that? Okay, I'll go over that again. In the Model 2, you would press the soft menu selector underneath the word page and then up arrow 1 time. It will display My ID. That is a unique ID that is programmed in that radio. The purpose for how to find your radio ID, 1, if you're going to assist mutual aid, say you're going up to Orangeburg to help at the SC State football game, you would contact us and let us know what your radio ID is, and we can dynamically regroup your radio to an Orangeburg County talk group. If you missed your radio, if you're missing your radio or it's lost or been stolen, let us know what the ID is. We'll inhibit it. Now, for those of you with a top display, because there wasn't that option to put those soft menu selectors, you would just press your push to talk and look at someone else would have to look at the display and tell what ID by pressing the push to talk.
Now, the radios currently are not turned on, the IDs are not, so they won't allow you to hit the system. The government decides to put in question things and such. When you do hit it, though, it's not like the old days when you had the folks at 2 o'clock in the morning would take the radio and start just, you got nothing better to do, you're shh, shh, shh. Well, now everybody sees your ID if you do that. Dispatch will have your ID, and dispatchers are they getting the ALS or the MTAG? Okay. They will be able to correlate a name with the ID, so when dispatch goes, as I say, unit, whatever radio, so however they decide to format that. So that's really good in case you have a problem. Not so good if you're messing around.
The difference between, I've noticed, the difference between the Apex and the XCS radio, you notice you have a color display. Scan. If you see the word scan in your display, this allows you to turn your scan on and off. You can program a scan list in your radio. In the Model 2s, you would arrow over. Let's see. Now Dennis has got me thinking second about the up arrow or left arrow now.
Still left and right.
Have to grab my radio. All right. You might have the word scan. Turns your scan on and off. In the Model 1s, the scan would be on the remote speaker mic button. If you want to program a scan list, you'll see the word SCNL in your display. Can someone check the model too and let me see that? You might see SCNL. You got
Yeah,
it?
SDNL, and then it actually changes to the zone. You see the zone right here there? And so you would just go through what zone you want to go to, and if you wanted to go, say, zone 1, call it an FR dispatch, you would hit the select button to select that particular item. The first time you hit that button, you see the Z with a flashing dot. Anybody not with me? The Z with the flashing dot. Z means scan. The flashing dot means that's priority 1. These are priority scanners. They'll do multiple levels of scanning. So that if you're scanning 30 or 40 different channels in the radio, and someone's out here talking away and somebody keys up on your dispatch channel, it'll override those others and come in on top. You have one priority 1 scan, that's the flashing dot. You have one priority 2 scan. You didn't program these for selected channel, did you, for priority?
Oh, let me look. I may have.
But once you
Not this one.
press the SCNL button, you'll see a box that starts flashing in your display. That lets you know, not an Apex?
It's the Z.
I programmed it for priority 1 is operator selectable currently, and priority 2 is selected channel.
Okay. Priority 2 is selected and priority 1 is selectable. That's why it's doing what it's doing, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So your choices and the way your radios are programmed, you have a priority 1 channel that you can assign to override any other channel. Whatever channel you turn to is your priority 2, so if anybody comes in on that channel, it will override everything else you're scanning except your priority 1. And then the rest of your channels that you select. And each time you hit that select button, you'll see that a Z changes. And it just cycles through the same thing. On priority 1, regular scan, nothing. On priority 1, regular scan, nothing. It just, each time you hit select, it cycles through the same thing over and over. And you can go to any, if you arrow to the right or left, you're changing your zones, up or down, you're changing the channels within that zone. So you can pick what you want to scan. Play with it. You get used to it. I know right now it's kind of Greek to you, but it'll take some time, but you'll get used to it. Just like using a cell phone almost. So if I arrow to the right, see, it changes completely different zones. We call it the 1 zone, we call it 2 zones, we call it Hampton County.
I'm going to switch to the next slide.
Right.
You may not have these other menu options. Let's see. And this one here.
Your home button is just like your enter button, or it takes you back.
Okay. Zone scan page. Who has something different that I haven't gone over? Y'all should see a site, soft menu selector. If you see the soft menu option for site, it means you can site lock your radio onto a specific site. We recommend that you do not do this unless you have a site trunking plan in place. We had a brand new customer to come on the system, and they thought it would be best for them to site lock their radio onto their primary site. But remember when I said we do quarterly maintenance on sites, we check the antennas and the feed lines, we take the site off the air in order to do this. Well, when we dropped the site, is what we call it, all of their radios went dead in the water. They called us raising hell, wanting to know what was going on. Well, we were like, why aren't your radios affiliating with your number 2 site there? Now, it took us a little bit of Q&A to figure out their radios were site locked. So that dispatcher or our shift sergeant had to call out to each one of those people on the road and tell them to unlock their unlock their radios. Once they did that, their radios started affiliating to their second site. But when you site lock your radio, you're preventing your radio from going out and seeing the closest site. CLCK, clock. Set your clock, date and time on the radio. Do y'all see that? If you continue to left or right arrow, you've got that. You see the command, the menus MUIS on the display. Do y'all see the MUIS? Do they have that?
Oh yeah, I got it.
It stands for nuisance. All right, say you have you programmed a scan list in your radio and you're sitting around on Sunday afternoon, you want to turn the scan on. Well, every agency has that one person that just will not shut up. So, while that, if you want, you can actually remove, you would temporarily remove that talk group from your scan list while that conversation is going. Press the NUIS and it will temporarily remove that talk group from your scan list until you power your radio off and back on again. You have a BATT soft menu selector. The BATT will show you the battery information on your radio. Now if you look at the bottom of that radio, you'll see the word Impress, IMPRES. This battery is made with smart technology. It works in conjunction with an Impress charger. Remember a long time ago when you had to put your radio in a charger? If the battery wasn't low and you kept charging it all the time, it would create and store memory in your battery. Well, what the Impress charger does, it prevents that from happening. Check your battery level information. It tells you the remaining capacity in milliamps. It tells you how many times the battery has been charged. So you put your radio into an Impress charger. You can also recondition that battery. It will drain it down and charge it all the way back up. If you put your radio with an Impress battery into a non-Impress charger, you will scramble those diagnostics in that battery and it won't display the battery information like it should. Mute will just mute the buttons and tones on your radio. Talking about call RCL, you may see RCL. You can just recall all of the talk groups in your scan list. The last three are Apex soft menu selectors. Well, remember VMute? We're going to come back to that. LOC, do these have GPS modules in them?
Nope.
Okay. If you're using a radio and you see the soft menu command LOC, if you press that, that will turn the GPS on in that radio. And you can also assign waypoints.
Provided the radio is capable of yours or not.
And ZNPR is just another soft menu command, basically like programming my favorites into a specific zone, kind of like you do. You bookmark your websites, on your computer. All right, I'm going to hand out these sheets. I'll do a Model 1 and a Model 2 per table.
You didn't do any dynamic zones for them?
No.
Okay. Disregard the dynamic zone program.
Now is the time to get familiar with the buttons and options on the radio that you have there in hand. If you have any paperwork that you have filled out for me that you haven't turned in, I can go ahead and take that. Yes, sir.
Need help with any getting through the radios or anything like that? Going through any of the buttons or all that?
Yes, sir, Model 1. This is the Model 1. Okay.
Several years old, we closed the door, maybe, they got them.
Oh, I want to say that.
Oh, okay. Remember that? When we were kids, they got them in Cracker Barrel, and you get all the chocolate ones. I would, the whole thing had all the flavors just to try and find that chocolate one. Sometimes they didn't have any in them.
Does anybody have any questions while we're doing this hands-on, the buttons?
Battery life.
The battery life?
Not over 5 years it should last. For a 24-hour shift, will this battery last?
It's designed for public safety. It's designed for a 12-hour shift.
It will not, bro. You might get till 8 o'clock, if that.
A lot of it depends on how the radio.
And how much you use it to.
I've had them set on the radio for two days and not had a problem whatsoever. But there's different batteries, different capacity. That's the first thing. By the capacity you have. It takes a lot more power to transmit than it does to listen. If there's a whole lot of traffic, that uses more than it just sitting there and not doing anything. If you're scanning, if you're in a building like this one, it's hard to get out. The radio's constantly saying, I can't see the site well enough. And it's constantly transmitting saying, hey, I need to find another site.
So it's a good idea to have these off.
When you're what?
Like here's the station.
I would, especially when he gets done with the, they're going to install and pipe it through the speakers. That's going to be whatever your recommendation, that's going to be something in town. If you want to make it my phone, I would prefer to.
It says dynamic regroup or something.
Yes, good question. Do you remember the dynamic regroup? I'm sorry, Dennis. Were you speaking? I'm sorry. I didn't interrupt. This gentleman over here had a question about dynamic regroup. There is a channel placement program in your radio. If you turn to it, that channel is going to bomb because there's nothing programmed there. It's for when that purpose, when your radio is dynamically regrouped, that's the channel it will go to. So it will say DYNREG.
We're not going to, I don't know how often you use that channel. We only have a suggestion. You know, if we were to become disoriented in a fire or something, and the knob stops at 16, how I have my radio now is my channel 1 goes to dispatch. And if I'm disoriented, I don't have to figure out which way to turn that knob. I can turn it all the way till it stops and go to channel 16 and have it.
Put your radio, put the little selector switch to the 0 with the slash through it.
Got it?
Now try changing channels.
This one changes. Yeah, without the slash.
Without the slash, it will change. With the slash, keypad locked.
Backwards.
Oh, it's backwards?
Yeah, it's working backwards.
Oh, really? Should lock. It's the open 0?
Now with the, you were talking about becoming disoriented.
Probably be easier if I had my glasses too.
So right there with the open 0,
Oh, okay.
like that.
Yeah, okay. I knew it was in there, just couldn't remember which way it was.
You don't do that. Okay, you're not doing it?
Because you may be in a building that can't get out. So it's part of, just like our radios operate today, whatever channel you're on, when you hit the emergency, it's going to be the same way.
Can everybody stop changing channels and making your radio talk and beep and stop talking for just a second and you repeat what you just said about the emergency?
Yeah. Just like our radios today, whatever channel that radio is on when you hit the emergency is the channel that's going to go across. You don't want it on the talk group channel inside of the building because it may not be, the signal may not get out of the building. So you're gonna have it on the direct channel inside when we fight fire, be on the direct channel, you hit it on that channel, the signal will go outside.
And a good example of that is the high school. If you go into high school and you're on a repeater, you're trying to get to a repeater somewhere, once you leave glass where you can see outside, you will not get outside that building.
Or this building.
If you switch to a direct, you can talk anywhere on that property, portable to portable.
Feedback, Tony. You guys will touch on that internally.
So which one is it, the direct channel? Yeah, I'm not sure, I guess it's called direct. Did you put the evac tone in?
Yes, I did. Would you like me to demonstrate that?
If everybody would take your radio, have them turn
Go
it
to one of the SCD tags.
SCD tag 4.
DIR.
Are you going to do DIR?
Let's go DIR. That way we don't have to worry about hitting the repeater. Let's see, I know it's in here somewhere.
Channel 14 in the radio.
SCDIR 1.
It's on one, channel 14.
So 1, channel 14.
Okay. You want to go 4? Okay, we'll go 4.
All right, Rex is going to demonstrate the evac tone.
I love this. Oops, I gotta do it right though. Now, you should all be hearing that.
No.
You're not on FCDIR 4?
There's nothing you want to see.
Oh, I'm using mine. Hang on a second.
Go to the right channel.
Gotta go to the right channel.
Before rebanding, there was a version of the SCDIR. After rebanding, it's 8 SCDIR. You only have 8 SCDIR because your radio's already been rebanded. Rebanding happened last year. Like the mechanics, I got the same thing on my radio. We haven't touched our own radio yet. We did it real.
There we go. This will work much better. That will go for as long as you hold. In order to do that, you have to key the radio, push the orange button, and it will go for as long as you hold the push to talk. You can't say anything across the radio, it doesn't. The only thing that does is put the tone out. Now, you can do it in conventional mode, you can do it in trunking mode. But always remember, key the radio first with the push to talk, then hit the orange button. If you do it the other way around, you'll be declaring an emergency and you'll never send out the evac tone and you'll irritate somebody. Probably dispatch, if you're just practicing. If it's a real emergency, that's fine. You declared an emergency, that's what you want. I guess, that's an internal thing, that's up to y'all how you do that, but that's the evac tone.
You'll hear it on your airback before we even figure it out on their phone.
Another thing with your emergency, in your first 2 zones, I'll have to look and see exactly, if it's a Colleton County talk group, it's tactical. It's whatever talk group you're on. If it's not a Colleton County talk group, the emergency reverts back to fire rescue dispatch. It doesn't go across the SCNAs, the regions, Hampton, any of those people, because the problem is somebody's going to see it, but they're not going to know who you are, is the problem. Your dispatch will get it if you're within range of getting back to dispatch. If you're in Aiken, it doesn't really matter anyway, or if you're in Columbia. But if you're working locally and you hit the emergency and say you're on Region 6, it's going to go back to dispatch on fire rescue dispatch talk group. Otherwise, like I say, it would go, dispatch would still show up at dispatch, but if you're working with somebody else, everybody else is going to get it, they're going to go, who's that? The other problem is, it goes a lot of different places, like highway patrol, and goes a lot of places.
Emergency can be your best friend or your worst nightmare with our channel service. Because they will try to find you. Well, they will find you because remember your ID is going out there.
Yeah.
And that ID is not in any other radio on the system. It belongs to you. It's your radio.
So don't let the kids play with the orange button.
So that's what happens at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll get a call from, highway patrol and they'll say, who owns ID so-and-so? And so-and-so owns ID, so okay, I'm gonna call the sheriff, I'm gonna call the chief, I'm gonna call the mayor, whoever they're gonna call, because they wanna start at the top to make sure it gets action real quick to find this person, because their first concern is this person okay? If you make a mistake, we all do, I used to train folks, and I get on one of the SEMAs, and I hit that emergency button as part of training, and then I tell dispatch, you can disregard, I've set this emergency off in training. What I didn't realize, I set the emergency off on every wireline console in the state. 46 counties went, boom, this guy's got a problem. So I created problems. I didn't even say, how would that not do that anymore? So the systems, the wireline consoles that you're going to have, will be able to know as soon as you hit that button. If you make a mistake, clear it before you key the radio. You can clear it. Let whatever channel you're on know, this is unit, Collin County Fire Unit 37, I'm fine, I accidentally hit the emergency button. All you're going to hear is 10-4. Problem solved. Nobody's going to come looking for you. Everything's fine. They just want to make sure you're really right. Okay? And then the training part comes afterward.
But I can test this emergency, but this is the training radio. This is the training radio, so it's not going to work. I'm so glad to have Dennis around.
He already demoed it because if you hit the emergency, in fact, just go ahead, everybody's still on that channel, right? Hit it like a regular emergency. This is what's going to happen.
Well, the problem is, that's conventional channel.
Yeah.
Well,
They should give the emergency on it.
yeah,
If not, we need to know, and because you can program these radios to do so many different things, it's good to have these training sessions starting out so we can fine tune the tempo before we go into the 800 radios. Right? So we want to test, make sure that it works the way you want it to work.
I don't think I have a program in my radio. It's programmed to do emergency, but it doesn't have any ID associated with it at this point. It's lives in the programming.
So your Astro, make the Astro ID the same as their 4-1 ID, then it will do that. If I know exactly the thing, so you can do it under the Express.
Well, now, it's going to be programmed per user ID. Well, 37, 41, 65, their employee number. So I don't have that information yet. Once I have that information, then it'll be programmed into the radio.
Okay.
Oh, Barking Dog, NBC. It's kind of in there, but it's not yet. You'll learn to love that, Barking Dog. So you will have emergency in conventional mode as well, in direct channels,
You want that in case you have a problem.
just in case.
Any questions so far? I know it's a bit confusing. It's going to take
It's a
some
lot
time
of
to play with them.
information.
Go through, the radios do a lot of things. Some things you'll use every day, some things you may not use in 100 years. But I want, somebody had a question about dynamic regroup, where it's at in your radio. I'll go over what dynamic regroup is one more time.
Dynamic regroups gives us the ability to add any channel in the system on the fly. We take your radio ID, we put it in a window, we choose a talk group, any of the 5,000 plus talk groups there are that are active, take your radio and send it there, take less than 3 seconds. You don't have to do anything. Your radio makes it sound, it goes like a boom kind of sound. You look at it, the display says dynamic regroup, you are on that channel. Okay? In order to change back to your dispatch channel, you have to know where dynamic regroup is programmed in your radio, because you physically have to turn to where that channel is in your radio, and then you can turn to any channel in your radio and it works fine like it normally would. And if you turn back to dynamic regroup, you're still on that channel that your radio was regrouped to. That's why it's significant that you know where that dynamic regroup is at in your radio. It's just a slot, but you have to turn to it to turn somewhere else. But once the system tells you ready to go there, it's going there. You have no choice. Okay. We would never do it though until the chief or somebody said, hey, I need to send these radios to this operator.
What would cause this radio, which used to say fire rescue dispatch, now says empty list?
What it is telling you is that you don't have anything in your scan list. Something that programmers try to keep from happening, but every now and then you get one that sneaks in there. All you have to do is go to your scan list, select the channel, stick it in there, and won't do that anymore. Tells you you can scan, but you don't have anything programmed in there.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't scan on that.
Yes, sir.
What is the range?
The range on the radios on average is 10 to 14 miles from a site, depending upon what's between you and the site. Like, you can go out in a parking lot and have RSSIs in the mid-80s to 90s. That's really good. 40 or less, you're going to have problems. In here, I've got 28, 31 on the Walter profile. So I'm not going to key out. But the range on that radio, antenna to antenna, if you're on a simplex antenna direct mode, digital, a half to 2 miles
Line of
max.
sight, clear, everything clear as a bell, just radio to radio. If you're going conventional radio to repeated and out to multiples, it's the same as if it was a trunk site, other than the sites aren't connected to each other. Okay, so that's 10 to 14 miles from the antenna talk in and back out.
Okay, let me reword it then.
Okay,
Say I'm in Greenville.
yes.
I know I probably won't be able to talk, but will I be able to listen
Negative. To what channel?
to our main channel?
Every agency that comes on the Palmetto 800 gets a dispatch talk group and a statewide roaming channel. Access to the system is controlled through the use of what we call site access profile. So your rates are determined by the number of sites required to cover your geographic area of responsibility. For Colton County, that's what, 3 or 4 sites, however, 5? Okay, 5, 3 plus 2 roamers. So your rates are set up by the number of sites you need to cover your geographic area of responsibility. However, if you're going to drive to Greenville and you need to talk back to dispatch, dispatch will need to know that you're going to monitor the statewide roam channel for your agency. And I don't, what are they calling that one, Greg?
Colleton Room.
Colleton Roam. You can go anywhere in the state, Colleton Roam, let dispatch know that's where you're at. If dispatch has it in the console, it might be a good idea. So that no matter where you're at in the state, you can talk back to dispatch. You can hear them. You will not be able to hear your regular traffic, though, what's going on. Nor would you really want to drag that traffic all over the state, because it's only happening here.
So call them on the phone, it's cheaper.
Let me dispel some rumors about the roaming, too. There's a lot of rumors out there. Oh, roaming's going to eat you alive. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg. Really? On a cell phone, what's it cost you for roaming? 45 cents, 50 cents a minute, or you have one of those unlimited plans and there is no roaming. On this system, roaming only applies if you key the radio up on a talk group on a site that you don't pay for, okay? On a site that you don't pay for. So if you go to Greenville and you key up a Greenville simulcast, they're definitely not paying for that here. When you key that radio up and say Unit 3 is 1024, or 1023, arrive on location. You key the radio up for maybe 3 seconds. It's 45 cents a minute based on push-to-talk seconds. You can listen forever, it costs you 0. But if you key the radio and you talk for 3 seconds, take the 45 cents, divide it by 60, multiply it times the 3 seconds you talked, you just spend $0.015. It's not a moneymaker for us. It's not what we do it that way. It's so that the folks here know what their radios are doing. So if they ask us for an individualized, detailed billing for that month, we know that your radio keyed up 37 times on Greenville simulcast. Somebody's going to say, "What's that? What's he doing in Greenville?" But if you sent 2 engines up there because there was a major fire of some sort, you know. He's just calling back to dispatch, let them know we're right on scene or whatever the case may be. It's so that you can self-police. If everybody had access to every repeater in the state all the time, what good would the system be? None. There's currently 80,000 plus radios on this system. Same zone controllers, acting as traffic cop. 80,000 plus. So the access to the system is by whatever you need. When you go to someone else's top group, you're using their site access profile. So you could get cards roaming for that. All right? If you go to Hampton County, I noticed you got Hampton in your radios. If you deploy to Hampton and you're hitting Hampton site and that's not one you use every day down here, it's not on your site access profile, it could be roaming charges when you need that. When you go conventional, you go in the building, that's what you're going to be on anyway. There's no roaming charge associated with any of that. That's all yours. Your conventional repeated, your conventional direct mode, that's all yours. There's nothing there. Only the trunk stuff. And it's there to make sure that you can self-police the use of the system and it doesn't end up getting thousands of busies when it shouldn't. If there's a need, go, use it. If there's not a need, don't. Pretty simple.
Dennis, maybe you could talk about some of the things that you guys offer in the event of a disaster, if a big hurricane came through and destroyed everything, and all the logistical support that you guys can provide. And
if you get a chance, come by our office when you're in the Columbia area, Full Harvesting Way. We'll show the Network Operations Center. We monitor it 24/7. Each repeater has multiple boards in it. Every board is monitored. So when I dispatch someone out to a site that says, we have a repeater malfunction, I know that board so-and-so and repeater number 4 at the Walterboro site has a problem. So when I send a guy out there, he knows exactly what to look for when he gets on scene. All that stuff's monitored 24/7. If anything happens in the system that affects over 25% of the resources at any one given site, we're dispatching on it. We have a arrival requirement within 2 hours by the time we dispatch on it. I'll give you a prime example. 3-day weekend last weekend, right?
Yeah. Who had to work?
She was on call. Y'all had to work.
I think I
together.
got 6 hours of sleep in 48 hours.
At 9:30 at night, 8:30 actually it was, I was at the house. Had a little fire going. Your wife and I sitting in the chair talking. She's been sitting down for all of 12 seconds and I got a second. I got a call. The embassy side is off the air. We use 48 volt DC power plants at all of our sites. What that means to you is if the AC power goes away, the site stays up and runs. Anywhere from 8 to 20 hours without power. But they got generator backups that since when the AC goes away, generator fires up, keeps everything going. But it's a great lightning arrestor too. That's why the sites, man makes it, it will break, okay? That's why the sites have very few problems. But this particular site had an older power plant on it and one of the batteries sorted out, okay? Within hours, I grabbed our portable site, which is a complete trunk site in a trailer, and headed for Yemassee. It was the Yemassee site right here on Mark 3895. And I brought in the portable site, less than 24 hours, we headed back on the air. If you ever have been involved with when a battery system, a DC battery system goes into a thermal what do they call it? Thermal runaway. That was the diagnosis. One of the batteries shorts out, it dead short in the battery causes all the rest of them. In this particular, there was a 16 pack of them there. It sprayed sulfuric acid or battery acid inside the whole building. What happens to metal when it comes in contact with that? What are the repeaters made out of? Metal. And all the wiring, grounding rods and everything in that building, let alone the techs opening the door and can't even go in without going under suits, respirators and the whole works. So those things happen from time to time. Fortunately, there's only been 2 of them in the last 10 years. But that's the kind of resource we have. We got a portable site. We're building a P25 portable site because we're building more and more P25 sites. The system is monitored 24/7. We've got a trailer set up that has antenna systems, enough antenna systems on it right now, probably build 25 sites. We've got 78. We have all that stuff, the feed lines and antenna resources and everything already purchased, setting in storage, climate controlled storage in most cases, ready to go should we get hammered. If the site gets knocked over in a hurricane, not a whole lot you can do about that. But the state's got portable towers. We've got portable tower we're working with the state on so that we can roll a tower in. It may only be 75 or 100 foot. Towers today are anywhere from 300, 400 foot. Stand the tower up, put the site in. If the connectivity's there, plug it in. If the connectivity's not there, let it run the site trunking so that you have localized coverage. That's the kind of stuff we bring to the table. Motorola opens a bridge at least 2 weeks in advance of any impending hurricane if they have an idea where it's coming.
That's where I was
If they
getting
don't,
at.
you get down to a week or so. It's a bridge, it's nationwide. The last one we did was on the East Coast in 2008, when one was going to get real close to us here on the East Coast. I still have batteries left over from stuff they pre-positioned for that. They bring 40-foot trailers loaded of equipment.
So anybody familiar with the emergency, the ESFs with state EMD? Because, we're contract with, we have contracts, we are part of that ESF too.
That's the communications section at the state warning point.
When the state warning point and when the state EOC activates 24 hours, our staff activates 24 hours.
If you're familiar with the NIM system on emergency response,
Yeah.
we participate in that. We've got pre-positioning, so OPCOM, THREATCOM 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the level is, our response parallels the states. We pre-position equipment and personnel so that if something happens. All the law enforcement common talk groups are used for lane reversals. It's already pre-planned. Y'all have fire trucks, great big lane blockers. They work really good. So there's a lot of cases where fire departments, and I wanted to bring this up because do you all respond, play in the lane reversal exercises? No? I'd be surprised if you don't. Maybe nobody in this room does. I'm sure someone from Collin County does because of 95. If you don't have the LE comms in your radios, and you probably won't fire service, that's what they use for lane reversals. We simply dynamically group the trucks and the people who are participating in the lane reversals. But those resources are there. All that stuff's done in the background. You pop one channel bank, which is what the T1 connects into, 30 grand worth of equipment. Boom, up in smoke. A lightning strike or something like that. All that stuff is taken care of. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So the infrastructure is there. We talked about doing preventive maintenance every 45 days, or every, 4 times a year. I think we got it down with antenna sweeps and everything twice a year now, by the way. Yeah. That's all stuff done proactive to make sure it stays in tune in the background. It's an FCC requirement. It's got to be within so many kilohertz. So we respond. There's about 9 of us. We can monitor 24/7 from either where we're at, from our homes, in the field. If you go by my truck out there and you hit your little Wi-Fi button, you'll see Unit 3. It's lit 24/7. I can have 5 to 6 units at LTE speed on a mobile Wi-Fi. But we have 5 of those units that can go anywhere in the state. We've got the antenna systems to back up and stuff, and you pre-position stuff because we're smart enough to know that if the stuff ever hits the fan, we ever take another direct hit, and it's not a matter of if, when we take the next direct hit from a hurricane, that all these things that we use, we're not the only ones that use them. People all over the country use the same type of equipment that we use, antenna systems and the whole works. You're not going to be able to get it for months and months because everybody's going to want it right then for those folks who didn't plan. We've got that stuff set aside. Hopefully we never have to use it, but it's there in case we do.
I was gonna, have we covered,
We haven't talked about the
Scan.
meetings.
I know, scan is
All right.
another one. Scan, and I thought of this, and I know you guys are gonna be using, like, going to the ops channels. And say you're in the southern part of Colleton County, and you hear dispatch tell them to go to ops 4, I guess, would be one of them, and you're in the northern part of the county and you're scanning, you're probably never going to hear what's going on. And the reason for that is, and I'm going to nip this question in the bud real quick, is because if nobody's registered on the Kennedy site on Ops 4, the traffic doesn't go there. So you would never hear the conversation on Ops 4 unless you specifically go to that channel. Because it only sends, if nobody's registered on that talk group, on that site, the traffic doesn't go there.
That's a very good point to bring up now. So remember we talked about sites profiles a minute ago, about what talk groups can talk on what sites, and that's how you control access to it. That's how your razor feeds are set up. That doesn't mean that somebody's always affiliated and on that site. You're scanning what you're hearing. We talked about the priority scan, your radio being able to scan different talk groups at the same time, and just unmutes to the talk groups that you're scanning when you're scanning them. In order for you to be able to hear that, the radio's getting that from this control channel data. There's 2 paths the radio uses. I'm going to try to not get too technical. There's 2 paths they use. If you turn the radio off, you're going to see a flashing light on top. Turn the radio on, you're going to see another flashing light. The radio's saying, I'm ID so-and-so, I'm on such and such talk group, I want to affiliate on such and such a site. The system says back to the radio, okay, I see you there. I will call you when somebody keys up on that site and tell you what set of repeaters to go to. It has to be listening to that control channel. That's where it gets its scan information from. The system will not send audio to a given site unless you're somebody physically turned to that talk group on that site. All right? Because it won't send it there. It's just a wasted resource. So if you're scanning a talk group and you absolutely have to hear that audio, turn to that talk group. Then you'll be the one affiliated and bring the traffic there. Okay, so what he's getting at is that some folks will say, well, I was scanning and I didn't hear it. Another person will say, well, I was scanning and I heard it. All right? And if you have a car radio, mobile radio, 35 watt antenna on top of a truck, talks a long ways, 25 to 30 miles to site. Your handheld may be affiliated on a different site than your mobile radio will. They scan at different speeds, different architecture. All right, so if that happens, ask the question. This may all seem Greek to you now, but it'll click once you start using it. Okay, when it happens to you, and you need to know. So remember that 2 paths. The audio path, which is my voice traffic, it's physics, it takes a lot stronger RF to send that audio over the airways than it does for little data packets going back and forth. All right? That's important to know, so be thinking about those 2 paths, especially when we get to the next subject, which is B-mute and call alert. You have pagers today. I don't know if they plan on keeping the pagers or however it's going to work, as long as you keep them maintained and all that. Good. And how are you going to use the V-mute functionality? These radios individually can be paged. They're not pagers. It's called call alert. It's confusing because you have a page button on the front of your radio. Okay? And you can hit that page button. If you had a full keypad, you can put any ID in the system in there and make the other radio beep 4 times every 5 seconds until someone touches one of the buttons on the front of that radio. That's something that we're talking about using when you get your new console in. If you have your radio at your house, you will have an assigned page talk group, right? Fire page. If you go to bed at night and you take your radio and you put it in charge, you leave your radio turned on, cranked up, you turn your channel to fire page, that will shut any scan off. We're doing it on purpose because we want your radio to be listening to that control channel. It has to get that page command from the control channel. If you're scanning, you hit your V-mute button, all your V-mute button does is mute the speaker until your radio's paged. If you leave your scan list on or something like that, which you can't in this case because it's programmed out of the page button, but just think, if you hit your V-mute button and you have it on any other talk group, the speaker is muted, but your radio is still functioning as normal in the background. If you're scanning and your radio
is off on this repeater pair listening to this conversation, it's not listening to the control channel anymore. If you get paged, your radio won't get it. So we have specifically assigned a talk group that you cannot even key up if you try to key it up. It'll say listen only on your radio. And there's no scan list associated with it. When you turn to that, scanning stops. So your radio is listening just like the pager would be listening. Okay? Coverage will depend on where you're at. So you need to know that you have the coverage to do it. It doesn't depend on the 40 or above voice coverage requirement, but it depends upon whether your radio can hear the system, whether the received signal strength is good enough to hear. So it's not a pager. It is a radio that can be called or alerted to unmute. So here's the plan. Your radio is sitting on your nightstand at night. You have it on the page talk group. You crank the volume all the way up because you know how dead sleepy we are when we're tired. I know that it takes a lot. That radio will start beeping. We begin with 2 hours. But that radio will start beeping 4 times every 5 seconds. Beep, 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 beep. If you ever hang up, it'll wake you up. As soon as you hit one of your buttons, that will stop it from beeping. That wakes you up. Is dispatch going to use multi-select?
My understanding, yes.
The plan is for your regular dispatcher, after they page the radios, to use a multi-select, which is outbound only patch for your dispatch talk group. So your radio is going to beep, 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 beep. You hit it, you silence it. Once dispatcher gets acknowledgement, and she knows whether your radio is turned on or not, because the system tells them no acknowledgement. That means that radio is not hitting the system either. There's no coverage, you can't talk, you can't hear anything, and you really got to be in the ditch on the data world, because even though I'm sitting here with a 28 RSS on, the radio will hear it every time. Okay? Unless there's some local interference or something right there on top of that radio that's blocking it. Even though I can't talk on it, the radio still hears the system. It still sees the silence. It's using the data path. That's why it's important to understand, get on that page talk group, make the radio listen to the control channel. It won't go anywhere, it'll sit there and listen to that control channel. And because dispatch can't key up. Once she pages a group of radios, the console won't let them key up until she gets an acknowledgement from all those radios back, or no acknowledgement. So if she has a status of all those radios, then she can multi-select, dispatch the call, and we're talking about 10 seconds, okay? We're not talking a long period of time. Multi-select, dispatch the call, your radio unmutes to the dispatch call without you having to take any action. Of course, your action would be as soon as you get up, click your dispatch talk group. You've got coverage to make sure you can hear it.
So,
The key is, am I within range of being able to hear it? Okay. Yes, sir.
so you won't hear anything on the actual page channel other than the beep, beep, beep.
Yes, you will.
Dispatch.
Initially, yes, you are correct. You won't hear anything until dispatch multi-selects and then keys the call. And it's outbound only. You will hear it on the page talk group if you're within range of the site.
But to talk to her, we have to switch to the
Yes,
main channel.
yes.
Okay.
We have made plans. I mean, if you stop thinking about it, you can what if it to death. What if I forget to change my page channel to my dispatch channel? I jump into a situation where I have a problem and I hit my emergency button. What happens? We've thought about that too. And that's going to be on the unit. And,
Keypad so you can put your credit card number in it, or what?
no, you have to scan it. You have to go across the screen.
Dennis, can you talk about
We're not there yet.
the affiliation of the radio with what dispatch is going to be selecting? I mean, a lot of the career folks they're at 13 tonight, tomorrow they're at 20, the next day they're at 6 or something. Their radios aren't going to be programmed to alert as the volunteers are, who are always associated with that. Can you talk about how those are changed and what a difficult process that is?
I'm not following you.
I do.
What?
To change it, if you're moving around from station to station to station, dispatch would have to know, if we have it set up to do a group page, to where, okay, we got 10 people to work station 11, say, for example. I don't know how many people there are. but these are the IDs of all of their radios. That has to be pre-programmed in Columbia
Into
For
a
that
folder on
function.
the office issue.
Well, it has to be, it gets real, it's not an easy thing to change.
I can make it easy. When you assign your radio, don't swap.
No. Station 11, but he's working Station 11 today. Tomorrow he's at Station 6. I want to get paid for Station 6, but he's already pre-assigned Station 11.
Yeah.
So, in order to page him, you have to put him over in Station 6's group. So either you have to know all of this ahead of time, because to change it on the fly requires a change in Columbia, which in turn would end up being then they'd have to reboot the consoles in order to get the new update.
The point here is that the career folks, y'all are not gonna be using your portables to get alerts in the middle of the night, because we won't be changing it to where you're at 6 tonight and at 20 tomorrow night or whatever. The volunteers who are associated with the station all the time, they volunteer at 11 or they volunteer at 13. They will use it. That's how they'll get their alerts.
Yeah, if it's a man
Sure, now
station,
you
it's not
guys
going to be an
rotate
issue.
people around. Okay, or missions. Stations, one station.
I mean, as long as it's a man station like this one, where it's going to have a base anyway, that's going to be alerted, doesn't make any difference. You don't need to have your portable on anyway at night.
Yeah, and you could always, if your supervisor knows where you're at, and he's the one that's on call with you, if he gets the call, he can page you by his radio. He knows your IDs.
That would be, that would be if we had a call list set up, because it doesn't have.
Supervisor don't have that? Oh, okay, never mind.
Or the station radio?
Understand.
Station
You could
radio?
have station-specific radios in there, if that's the case.
Yes.
If you got 2-man personnel at one station, then they could you could have station-specific radios for that station.
You have a problem when you go home.
That way, they're not changing, they would just be using those radios at that station as opposed to.
There's so many parameters you can program into the radios today for what they can do.
Well,
And every parameter has,
then the problem, you're right, you could have it to where there's station radios, you can do that. Then what happens is if someone picks up that radio and declares an emergency, you have to know who has that radio. Becomes the other problem. Well, it's the Station 5 radio. Okay, that's great, but who's got it?
Well, the bottom line on that is that they're $4,500 a piece. Each one of those is 45, 40, what is it, 4,700? 3,800? 36, 38, whatever.
That's a deal there.
So they won't be on the trucks, they won't be in the stations, just sitting there, because right now people are stealing the $200 ones we got, so we probably don't need to put the 3,600 ones out there. So I mean, they'll be assigned to you. Each volunteer is going to get one, each career person is going to get one, they're assigned to you. So just.
and this is the initial training to get you started, to familiarize you with the difference between what the conventional resources you're using today and then the trunk world, what it's bringing to the table. I mean, there's things coming in the P25 world that blow your mind. I could sit at my desk and program your radios over the airwaves in the P25 world, provided your radio is capable. It's coming. You could have do the logistics and do the radio manager at his office over the airway. Yes, sir.
So when
Texting.
these go into service on day one here, I'm still using channels 1 and 4? Just like our radios that we use now for calls? 4 would be
Channel 1 is-
our dispatch channel, and channel 4 would be our tech.
Dispatch channel. If you're going to a fire, on scene, would be one of the last 5 channels in that radio. 8 SC DIR 1 through 5. Something will come out soon about designating which one we use for, like today we use TAC 4. The ops channels, there's 6 ops channels here. The first three, the sheriff's office, they're primarily using those op channels for incident. We'll have the last 3, 4, 5, and 6. You know, we won't be doing interior operations on Ops 4 per se. You know, we'll be using one of the direct channels for that. But that's something to come out soon. But I mean, we have a major incident, you know, wreck on the interstate. We have multiple sheriff's office there doing different things. We need to get traffic off the dispatch channel. We may use the Ops 4 channel.
Marty, Robert asked a question too while you're talking. He's not here to hear the answer now, but he asked about mobile repeaters. Maybe you can talk about the DVRSs and
DVRSs, we have 2 of those, one for fire rescue, one for the sheriff's office. There's a channel in there in the second zone.
What does DVRS stand for?
Digital Vehicle Repeater
System.
Yeah. Those use a 700 megahertz conventional channel, which talks from your radio to this repeater. It rebroadcasts it on a set talk rate. You know, it's limited. It's kind of like it's a half mile range in that area to this repeater system. We had a major incident saying smokes. There's very poor coverage in that area. You know, we could put one of these up and it would increase range in that around that incident. It's not something for day-to-day operation. For a temporary incident location that has poor coverage, we could increase the coverage for this DVRS.
And then when we go P25, it actually passes PTT ID and everything. Today it doesn't, it just passes your audio. It's basically you talking in conventional local channel to a trunk radio into the system seamlessly and back. Fills in hole, RF hole. If you put one in this building right now, you take your radio, turn it to that 700 megahertz assigned conventional channel, and you can talk to the system.
And you'll see in the first zone,
Thanks.
2 channels, that is 7 HS DVRS and a 7 MS DVRS. That's for the high school and the middle school. Now, that's a 700 meg conventional frequency there's going to be a repeater at the high school and the middle school, because from my understanding, there's 0 coverage inside those buildings. And the only place that is going to go to is back to dispatch. That's the only place it's going. Now, if you're on scene and you're doing something inside the building, both of you can have people outside on these 7 HS DVRS channels, say for example, if you're in the high school, and you can still talk to the people inside. But you won't, and I think, dispatch will hear you. But it's, like I say, that's the only place it's going to go back to is dispatch on the trunking system. So if you go to that channel and you're not close to the school, you're never going to hear anything.
What talk group is dispatch looking to? Because they will hear that.
They don't have it in the radios anymore.
I guess they won't.
And because I was told not to put it in the radios, because that's just, what it's primarily for is for the school resource officers. However, and here again, I wouldn't guarantee if you guys are going to the high school that the DVRS is going to be working, because if there's a fire, you're probably going to kill the power to the building. I'm not real smart. I don't do fires, but I'm assuming that's one of the things y'all do before you start putting water on the red stuff, is make sure there's no AC flowing. Here again, I'm not real smart,
But as far as the high school and the middle school is concerned, we did some testing with the 800 radios, conventional channels to the 8 SEDERI, DIR.
Direct channels.
Direct channels. You can talk anywhere in that high school or the middle school, and half a mile down the road, we were away from the school. And still have communications direct. You can't talk to dispatch to the talk group, but directly you can talk from inside, anywhere in that building to the outside. As long as somebody's on the outside, incident commander, you still have communication to the outside. I mean, you're not in there in a dead world.
Bottom line is with these radios, you should be able to talk to somebody with proper planning all the time, everywhere, period. With radios.
Hey Marty, why wouldn't we be on TAC 4, say, inside that building talking? Like if I'm on the first in attack team at the high school, why am I not on Ops 4? Yeah.
Well, Ops 4. Yeah, I mean, as soon as you go into high school, you go down, once you go through the first set of doors, your communications to the 800 talk group are gone. If you're on the Ops 4 talk group, remember that channel, the signal goes from the radio to probably the Walterberg Tower and then back. You're not going to have that ability. You know, that radio go from inside to a mile outside of the building. Right. So you want to have that direct channel where you're just going outside the building. You don't want to go all the way to the tower.
Can I say something about that?
Right.
So the HS and the MS channels, we could go on to talk to
You
dispatch?
you could go on that channel if you're on the medic unit.
If we're
You
on
have
medical call.
a medical call in the high school, go to that channel. Anywhere in there, you can talk back to dispatch. Now, supervisor, anybody else that's out in the field, they're not going to hear your radio traffic. Dispatch will.
In the sheriff's office, resource office.
You know, whoever's in that school, you know, if the resource officer is in there on that channel, they'll hear you. But everybody else won't. Just keep that in mind. I mean, it's communication from inside the high school, outside the dispatch, and the middle school. Yes.
How's the coverage down at Edisto Beach?
There are some holes there. As far as mobiles, they work fine, from what I understand. We're having a meeting on that this
Car
week.
radio versus handheld. We call it mobile radio, car radio mounted, and some people call them something different, portables, handheld.
Marty. I know in Somerville, we have the same issues. Somerville, like Walmart, Somerville Med, as soon as you walk in, you can't talk to dispatch. But what we do is we go to a direct channel, and if you've got enough, I understand it's manpower issue, but if you've got enough people, we leave somebody outside that can relay from the inside crew to dispatch.
You still have that problem on the new Somerville site? Rob tells me they can talk 3 stories down in Somerville now.
I honestly, because I drive the truck, so I'm outside anyway.
I understand.
So, I mean,
That new site, where you used to not be able to talk at 199 on 26, you now get RSSI in the mid-80s. You had nothing before.
I'd have, yeah, like I said.
And I'll interject this because I've been doing this for 100 and some odd plus years, it seems like. If you're going into a building, and I'm sure this is part of your SOP, don't stay on a repeater, don't stay on the trunk system, go to direct channel.
That's what standard fire operating.
At least that's my recommendation, because a bad time to find out it don't work is when you got it in a ringer. Bad time to find out. And that's just my opinion, my suggestion. Y'all can do what you want. I know people that do otherwise, but that's just my suggestion.
Right. There's a lot of agencies on the system that actually use the trunk talk group to go into all their buildings because they have sites that are close to where their community's at. You don't have that luxury. And I believe, y'all know fire service a lot better than I do, you're not supposed to go into a burning structure unless you have a simplex conventional channel, right? So that you have removed every failure possibility between you and the person you want to talk to. But there's still some folks that want to be recording, so I'm not sure what your procedures are for Palmetto County where you want to start building.
Yeah, I mean, we'll make some changes to that. We'll be using one of the direct channels.
It could happen any day, to any firefighter, on any radio system, no matter if it's analog or digital. Background noise, a siren, a saw, a pump panel, or a pass device on an SCBA can cause audio distortion and drown out communication. Sound familiar? Whether you use analog or digital, it's important to understand how to best use your portable radio to maximize its features and make sure your communication is loud and clear. Clear, coherent communications are mission critical to all first responding agencies. That's why communications manufacturers have been working with the International Association of Fire Chiefs, the IAFC, to test, track, and pinpoint the best ways for firefighters to maximize communication intelligibility and overcome background noise whenever they use a portable or mobile radio, no matter where they are, no matter if it's analog or digital. From Chicago to Orlando, New Jersey to North Carolina, in big cities and small towns, Motorola has met with hundreds of firefighters to understand their challenges and respond with real-world solutions and robust technology that meets their needs, from the firehouse to the fireground. Mission-critical communications is not only our work, it's been our passion for over 75 years. And this experience is critical to improving your safety and success. But before we look at how to cut noise and clear up communications, let's look back. It's late 2006, and the IAFC has received reports from several fire departments concerned about audio distortion when they operate digital radios in environments with high levels of background noise. The IAFC establishes a digital problem working group that reaches across agency and industry lines to specifically address this issue.
We created a special task force, the Best Practices Subcommittee, to investigate this problem and to recommend potential solutions that we could implement today to improve communications. The questions we posed was, what can radio users do to minimize or eliminate distortion? The task force brought together radio manufacturers and fire service agencies to discuss and test the best ways to achieve this. They determined that the quickest and easiest way for field radio users to minimize background noise and to improve intelligibility of their speech was by using best practices and by training users how to do it. The IAFC developed a set of best practices that radio users can follow in a number of everyday scenarios. It's simple but effective training on how to best use the radio as a technological tool. The best practices are something that everyone can do immediately to improve their communications. Using IAFC best practices, along with optimal customer programming software settings in the radio, can improve the audio quality and intelligibility significantly. And that can make all the difference between incoherent audio and clear communication.
Here are 3 key recommendations from the IAFC best practices. And here is the phrase to remember them every time you use your radio. Shield, move, talk. Shield the microphone from noise. Use a free hand when possible and turn away from the source of the noise. Use your helmet brim or visor to shield your microphone from rain or water. Move the microphone to your mouth, 1 to 2 inches directly in front of your mouth. If you're wearing an SCBA, move the microphone to the voice port of your mask. Talk in a loud, clear, controlled voice. Don't shout. Shield, move, talk. Remember this phrase, and you're well on your way to clear and coherent communication. Now, let's look and listen to 6 different scenarios most firefighters encounter. First, we'll show you some incorrect ways firefighters use when trying to communicate. Then, we'll show you the IAFC's recommended best practices. We bet you'll hear the difference, loud and clear. Scenario number 1 is no SCBA, no noise. Here, you don't have to battle background noise, but the microphone is 3 to 5 inches away, still too far away from the voice source. The radio isn't being optimized. Your voice isn't loud and clear. Here's what it sounds like on analog.
Man, engine 112 crew. We have a firefighter down on the 4th floor.
Here's what it sounds like on digital.
Ladder 303, Charlotte Fire. How long until you're on scene?
Now, the best practices. Simply move the microphone 1 to 2 inches in front of your mouth. Talk directly into it. Don't shout. Hold it close to your mouth like a megaphone or bugle. Here's what best practices sounds like on analog.
Man, engine 123 crew. We are continuing the search in the basement.
And here's digital.
Charlotte Fire, engine 317 is en route to the scene. ETA 10 minutes.
In both cases, the difference is loud and clear. Scenario number 2 is no SCBA, pump panel noise. This is a common situation where you're a few feet from the pump panel and you're not wearing SCBA gear. If the mic is on your lapel, it is too far away to properly transmit your voice. You sound underwater. Instead of telling the unit, you're sending water. Here's what it sounds like on analog.
Engine 110 crew, Chief 22. Confirm your position in the building.
And here's digital.
Engine 221, engine 233. Increase the pressure on both lines.
Now, the best practices. Move the microphone 1 to 2 inches in front of your mouth. Talk directly into it. Don't shout. Turn away from the pump panel. Move away from the pump panel whenever possible. Here's what best practices sounds like on analog.
Truck 32 is on the scene, 5449 West 55th Street, westbound.
And here's digital.
Engine 20 engineer to engine 20 officer. Here comes your water.
In both cases, the difference is loud and clear. Scenario number 3 is no SCBA, mobile noise. This is a very common scene where you're in the fire truck when it's moving and you're not in SCBA gear. The microphone is too far away to properly transmit your voice, particularly as the engine accelerates, the road noise escalates, and the siren wails. Here's what it sounds like on analog.
Engine 31, Chicago Fire. Confirm you're responding to 17th Smith Street.
And here's digital.
Chief 11, platform 114. This smoke and flames at the track at the south end.
Now the best practices. Move the microphone 1 to 2 inches in front of your mouth. Talk directly into it. Don't let it hang from the rearview mirror and shout into it. Move it directly in front of your mouth. Here's what best practices sounds like on analog.
Plantation Fire, engine 317 is en route to the scene. ETA 10 minutes.
And here's digital.
Engine 421, Chief 40. Base is set up at Maple and James Street.
In both cases, the difference is loud and clear. Scenario number 4 is SCBA, no external noise. Here, you're on the air supply, listening to the sound of your own inhalation and exhalation. There's no pass device or alarm, but the microphone is too far away from the voice port and speech is muffled. The radio isn't being optimized. Your voice isn't loud and clear. Here's what it sounds like on analog.
84 is on the scene, 5944 South State. We're northbound. We have a fire.
And here's digital.
Engine Company 29, Elmwood Command. Command is set up at Elm and Henry Street.
Now the best practices. Move the microphone and place it directly on the voice port of your SCBA mask. Place it on the voice port, not the voice amplifier. Talk in a loud, clear voice. Don't shout. Here's what best practices sounds like on analog.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. I am in the basement. Firefighter Gaines from Truck 5. I am trapped.
And here's digital.
Command, Engine Company 5 crew. Can you repeat your last message? Engine Company 29, Elm Command. Command is set up at Elm and Henry Street.
In both cases, the difference is loud and clear. Scenario number 5 is SCBA with pass alarm noise. Here, you are not moving, and your pass device is loudly going off. The microphone is too far away, and your speech is overpowered by the sound of the alarm. The radio isn't being optimized. Your voice isn't loud and clear. Here's what it sounds like on analog. And here's digital. Now, the best practices. Move the microphone and place it directly on the voice port of your SCBA mask. Put it on the voice port, not the voice amplifier. Talk in a loud, clear voice. Don't shout. Here's what best practices sounds like on analog.
Command, engine 131. We're conducting a primary search.
And here's digital.
Engine 31, Palmetto. Confirm your response to 17 Smith Street.
In both cases, the difference is loud and clear. Best practices are even more critical as new vocoder and noise reduction algorithms are introduced. So remember, move the mic and place it directly on the voice port of your SCBA mask in these scenarios. The IAFC recommends that alarm emitters be located as far away from the radio and microphone as possible. The IAFC also recommends using a free hand when practical to muffle your alarm emitter when activated. Both of these steps can significantly improve audio quality and clarity. Scenario number 6 is SCBA with rotary saw noise. Here, a firefighter is using a K12 saw in your presence. The microphone is too far away, and your speech is overpowered by the mechanized noise in front of you. The radio isn't being optimized. Your voice isn't loud and clear. Here's what it sounds like on analog. And here's digital. Now the best practices. Move the microphone and place it 1 to 2 inches in front of your mouth. If you are wearing an SCBA, put the microphone on the voice port of your mask. Turn away and move away if possible from the source of the noise and talk directly into the microphone in a loud, clear voice. Don't shout. Here's what best practices sounds like on analog.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. I'm on the second floor, sector 1. Firefighter 2, good truck 2. I'm out of air.
And here's digital.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. I am on the roof. Firefighter Jones. I don't have a way off.
In both cases, the difference is loud and clear.
Whether you have analog or digital communications, high levels of background noise are a continual challenge. But simple steps used properly can make a major difference. Today's radios are intricate devices with many configurable options. Some of these options can have a significant impact on a radio's performance when operating in high noise environments. That's why the IAFC recommends that departments work with their vendors to ensure their radios and accessories are configured with the optimal settings for audio quality and clarity. Consult with your radio manufacturer on how to best program your radio and how to properly use it. It's a critical piece of equipment, so make sure it really works for you. Accessories for your radio can make a dramatic difference too. The IAFC recommends the use of speaker mics, throat mics, and in-ear mics to reduce the impact of noise. Retractable microphone attachments also help bring the microphone closer to your mouth and let it return to its clip while you're wearing an SCBA. Reducing background noise requires a multifaceted approach, working with various fire service manufacturers, customizing radio settings, and using the right accessories. But an immediate solution with the most positive impact is training and best practices. While efforts and investments continue amongst various product manufacturers to bring additional noise reduction technology to the fireground, best practices can dramatically decrease distortion and increase intelligibility, starting today. If our firefighters implement best practices in training right now, they can maximize the performance of the most important technological tool, the portable radio. With the IAFC best practices, you can say it and hear it loud and clear. The IAFC best practices is the best way to say no to background noise and yes to clear communication.